All right, so today we're going to take a look at hearing. So we're going to talk about the structure of the ear and also how external stimuli is being translated into signals that the brain can interpret. So first, let's take a look at the structure of the ear. So just like the eye, we have to make sure that we understand the parts of the ear, but also how stimuli travels from the air to the brain. So from if there's sound coming um, from the outside of the ear, right, it's going to travel from the pinna, or it's also called the auricle, to the external auditory canal, to the tympanic membrane, to the ossicles, to the oval window, to the organ of Corti. So let's break that down. So I talked just about the outer ear first. So let's take a look at that. So I always like to go from outside external stimuli. So when we're looking at the outer ear, sound is going to travel from the pinna, auditory canal, and tympanic membrane, which is also our eardrum. Okay, so that's how sound travels to the outer ear. I'm going to draw that here as well so you guys can follow along, not only with the text, but also if you encounter some visual representation on the MCAT. Afterwards, it'll travel through the middle ear. And so that's where we have the malleus, incus, and staples. And these are the three little bones here that are responsible for sound amplification. And so we know that the staples will then contact something called the oval window. The oval window is very, very small, right? It's right here, right? It's responsible for amplifying that sound, okay? So when the staples contacts the oval window, it will amplify that sound. And you can see that right here. Lastly, we can look at the inner ear. So the inner ear involves, for sure, the oval window, like I just talked about. There's also a round window here, okay, but we're not going to talk too much about it. And then we also have the cochlea and the semicircular canals. So the semicircular canals are very important for our that vestibular sense, our sense of balance. Okay? The cochlea is responsible for our ability to hear. And we know from earlier in the beginning of this video that there's this organ called organ of Corti inside the cochlea that allows for those external signals to be really translated into signals that the brain can interpret. So let's take a look at that a little bit more in depth on how that happens. So we see that in terms of sensory perception, okay, for pitch, high frequency sounds are detected near the base of the basilar membrane, while low frequency sounds are detected near the apex of the membrane. So this membrane is located in the cochlea, if you are unsure. So it's located in this right here, the cochlea right here. This is just an example of the basilar membrane. For sure, it's been straightened out, so it's easier for us to visualize. But you see how with higher frequencies is near the base, right? The base, whereas think about that as the foundation, the bottom of the membrane. And then the apex is like the top, right? Think about apex predator, right? Top, top, top. So that's where the lower frequencies are going to be processed there. Right? And then in terms of loudness, we really just take a look at the amplitude of vibrations, right? And that just relates to how strong or how much essentially the hair cells are vibrating. So let's take a look at that. So as the sounds vibrate the basilar membrane, hair cells are pushed up against the tectorial membrane. So what we see here is that we have these hair cells, right? They're attached um, to the basilar membrane, like at the bottom, for example. And then as they as the basilar membrane vibrates, the hair cells are pushed up against the tectorial membrane. So tectorial membrane is like on top of these hair cells, like that. And so it causes stereocilia to bend. And so stereocilia are these, think about them as mini hair cells, these mini hair cells on top of the hair cells. And so they are mechanoreceptors, right? Remember, mechanoreceptors, okay, respond to some sort of movement, some sort of touch, right? Think about mechanics. Okay, so that's why they're mechanoreceptors. Many people think about them as chemoreceptors. That's not correct. They are mechanoreceptors. Okay, and so since the cilia is going to bend on the tectoral membrane, it results in the release of neurotransmitters or excitatory neurotransmitters. And so then electrical signals will be produced and it will be sent to the auditory cortex and the temporal lobe for processing. Remember, for hearing, okay, the auditory cortex is in the temporal lobe. For vision, okay, the visual cortex is in the occipital lobe near the back. So there is a difference there that we want to understand. Okay. So overall, we've talked about how sound passes through various membranes, right? Outer, the middle, and the inner ear. Okay. And then there's that mechanosensor. What is the mechanosensor? That is our stereocilia, right? These are our mechanosensors. And then we have our firing of action potentials. We'll talk about that a little bit more, but for now, we just have to know that this is how electrical signals are generated for our brain to interpret. Okay, that is all for hearing. Make sure you study hard, and I'll see everyone in the next video.